Well, hi everyone. Welcome back to Family Matters. Look, we have been dealing with all sorts of issues over the last few weeks and months, but we're turning to one that's exceptionally important now. It's really around the objectification, the sexualisation, particularly of children, but of women in general. So I'm very pleased to bring on to the show Melinda Tankard Reist. She's one of the co-founders of Collective Shout. Melinda, welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be with you, Simon.
Hey, look, there's many more accolades to put against your name. I know you've worked in media, you've worked in the political realm, you're an author of at least, I think, 6 books, you're a commentator. We could probably spend the entire show listing off all your achievements, but you're now part of something called Collective Shout, and I think we'll want to get into that more in depth, but just give us a quick flavour of what this is, what this organisation does, and then I want to turn to a recent survey and report that you've put out around teachers and children. But yeah, give us a quick insight into what Collective Shout's all about.
Sure, Simon. Well, I love talking about the history of Collective Shout. We're a grassroots campaigning movement against sexualisation of children, objectification of women, the harms of pornography, porn culture, trafficking, violence against women, and we make the links between all of those things. I co-founded the movement 15 years ago. And it came about as a result of my 3rd book. I actually have 7 books. I'm working on the 8th, so I've got to update the bio somewhere. But anyway,
you can see I was on Wikipedia.
So Wikipedia's a little out of date, but that's fine. No worries. So I wrote a book called Getting Real: Challenging the Sexualisation of Girls, and one of the contributors to that book was a young woman who'd struggled with body image issues, and she realised that the culture she was living in made her hate herself. And she wrote a piece about how that felt and how she was trying to resist toxic cultural messages. And she wrote to me after the book came out and said, "Your book's a collective shout against the pornification of culture." Though that phrase leapt out at me, I thought I need to start a movement just to use those words, and that's how Collective Shout was born. We're a grassroots. We campaign every day. We bring together all kinds of people who have the same concerns. We have thousands of people involved in Australia and internationally. We're a small team, but we punch above our weight. Last year alone, we had 34 victories, our biggest year ever, against companies, corporations, businesses who exploit the bodies of women and girls for a profit. We have had victories against trillion-dollar corporations. For example, the big shopping platforms. We got child sex dolls removed from all of those shopping platforms, at least 5 platforms now, including Etsy, Alibaba, Made in China, and others. It's hard to believe, isn't it? But replica children, body parts, custom made, anatomically correct. It's a global trade. We got all of those down off the major shopping platforms. That's just one victory of multiple. Getting objectifying billboards removed, getting sexualized clothing for children out of stores. We have just today. You are hearing this first, actually.
Breaking news.
This is breaking news. We're about to announce it. Collective Shout led a global campaign targeting Spotify for hosting pimping hose courses of Andrew Tate. So Andrew Tate, notorious misogynist, training boys in how to control women, how to dominate women, how to groom women, how to target all kinds of women and girls to get them to sell themselves for your profit, to sell themselves on OnlyFans, to support the male. And his courses were available through Spotify. A lot of people wouldn't realize that. They would think it's just music streaming. And so we targeted Spotify, and we have just achieved that victory. All of those courses are gone as of this morning. And also, we ran a change.org petition, which is the biggest petition in our history, the biggest result. We got close to, I haven't checked the latest, but close to 150,000 signatures. It was trending on the Change website. So we engage in social change, cultural transformation through grassroots activism, grassroots action. We help people recognize they have a voice, they can speak out, they can do something. Collective Shout also led the campaign to get an age verification trial in Australia as one obstacle in the way of children accessing rape porn, torture porn, sadism, incest porn, because right now there are no proof of age protections. There is nothing to stop young children from accessing the most hardcore, sadistic content imaginable or not even imaginable. And we finally persuaded our government to run an age verification trial, which is underway as we speak. So there's some of the campaigns that we have backed and we've been behind.
Well, just a few highlights. I mean, that's amazing. That really, I mean, it's
amazing,
quite...
Yeah. We have to remind ourselves of our wins because it's a dark space. Pornography is destroying the social compact. It's destroying young people. It's destroying relationships, destroying developing sexual templates, which is contributing to a rise in harmful sexual behaviours in schools. So we do need to keep reminding ourselves. Last year was our biggest year, 34 wins. You can find them on our website. And, be encouraged that speaking out really does make a difference. We see that regularly.
Oh, it's so vitally important. And look, I take encouragement. I mean, one of the things we've been lobbying or pushing for here in New Zealand is that age verification around pornography. We've not been successful yet. There doesn't seem to be the political will. But I think what you're showing, Melinda, and what Collective Shout's achieved is just constant pressure. But when you talked about everything...
pressure over a long period of time. But I can tell you what I think swung it in the end. The evidence was incontrovertible, not only the global academic literature, but the stories of parents, the stories of teachers. And where I believe we achieved the shift, if this can be useful to you, is we spearheaded an open letter with our leading women's safety and child protection organisations and individuals in this country, the biggest names, the most recognised names in the field of child safety and women's safety. And we got them all together in record time, including Robert Fitzgerald, who led the Royal Commission into institutional responses to child abuse, including Grace Tame, Chanel Contos. They're big names here. And we brought them all together in an open letter to the government. We also coalesced with an epidemic of violence against women in this country, which you have there too. And we said you can't address violence against women if you don't address the key driver, one of the key drivers of violence against women, which again, the global literature shows. And the Prime Minister had convened an emergency cabinet meeting to deal with the latest murder of a woman in this country. And we released that letter at the same time. And at that cabinet meeting, it was announced a suite of measures that would include an age verification trial, which we had lobbied for years. So, perhaps you can replicate that over there. We'd be happy to help you with that.
I'd love it. New Zealand seems to have a desire from both experts to those, if you will, at the grassroots, not to rock the boat. I don't know if it's a particularly quintessential New Zealand quality, but trying to get people who will often share with us, Melinda, their own stories, but to say, hey, would you go public? Can we even just remove your name? There's often a resistance, and there's still a false narrative that a lot of this stuff, pornography, the use of OnlyFans, the expression of one's sexualism, is empowerment. And that sort of false narrative is still quite well stuck in media and political mindsets, which we have to shift because it's the antithesis of everything you've been saying. But
it certainly is, and we know that Pornhub, for example, is a crime scene. This is not about empowerment. Women were drugged, raped, filmed. Pornhub's been forced to get rid of 90% of all the videos on its site because of the campaign led by Lina Micklethwait, who we work very closely with. So there's nothing empowering about depicting women being choked, strangled, tortured, degraded. And Pornhub was also exposed for trafficking and for hosting trafficking content and child sexual abuse. OnlyFans as well. Most women don't make that much money on OnlyFans. A recent Reuters investigation found rampant abuse of women, mistreatment, women ending up on OnlyFans through manipulation, being tricked. So the truth is coming out. But yes, none of this is empowering. And we have more women describing what it was like for them. For example, a young woman here in Australia, Victoria Sinnis, ran the largest OnlyFans recruitment agency in this country, and she heard me speak and left the industry 5 days later. And she has now become a whistleblower for that industry, about that industry. Her role was to recruit girls. Her role was to trawl through girls' social media accounts and persuade them to join OnlyFans. You know, you're so hot, you've got the look we're looking for, we can help you make lots of money. And she describes herself now as a pimp and a predator, and she is making amends for that by speaking out. She's touring globally now as a result of speaking out against OnlyFans. So the truth is coming out.
God, we need her over here. We were saying before we came on camera, I was mentioning to you, a lot of New Zealand's legacy media effectively promotes OnlyFans, what I would describe, Melinda, as puff pieces about how much money's been made, how easy it is, and again, an empowerment narrative. Whereas, you know, from my observations, and you mentioned Andrew Tate, I'll be honest, apart from what I've read in media, he's a despicable person, but basing around the abuse, the objectivity of women and girls, that's not empowerment, that's abuse, and yet it gets celebrated.
Yes, it certainly does. And Collective Shout, along with the Coalition Against Trafficking in Women Australia, produced a report around 3 years ago about the normalisation of OnlyFans and the normalisation and promotion of the sex industry in mainstream media during COVID lockdowns. And obviously we got no mainstream media attention for that report. Surprise, surprise. But we exposed the way that vulnerable women especially get recruited into this industry. And, you know, you just can't help but suspect there's some paid sponsorship from the industry, because OnlyFans gets a free kick, you know, most days. And, you know, these scenarios like poor mother of three makes millions on OnlyFans. Well, most women don't make anything on OnlyFans. It's a crowded space, and women have to do more and more degraded things to make any money at all. They have to look young, and they have to, this is what Victoria Sinners said, that she could see how the girls had to break down their own boundaries, their own conscience, to be able to make any money at all, because what the market demanded, those girls hadn't originally wanted to do. But if they didn't do those things, they wouldn't make any money.
That's why the empowerment argument, I know I keep coming back to this, but it's one of the things, Melinda, that frustrates me no end, is that's the narrative. Certainly here, I suspect, as you've been intimated, in Australia, around the world, but it's like, no, this is being driven by demand, and particularly from men, the Andrew Tates of the world.
And it's a PR spin of the sex industry, which has a lot of money, let's face it, and has a lot of power and influence. You know, money buys influence. Follow the money trail. And they've been able to maintain this myth. But, you know, we're doing everything we can to dismantle it. How
much we've got to get on to the whole teachers and what's happening there, or to teachers. But, I mean, how much resistance do you find? You mentioned earlier, and I know you've worked some campaigns against advertisers who are explicitly, basically, child pornography to promote their goods. I mean, how much resistance do you face in these circumstances, or are there moments when the moment you've highlighted what they're doing, they back off? Which one is it?
You know, I've been engaged in this work for quite a long time, even pre Collective Shout, and I believe there's a shift, and I believe that Collective Shout has had a significant influence on the shift in public thinking. So when we first started out, we were on the outer a bit. We were kind of outliers, but we have seen a change in advertising now. For example, we would see in the past a lot more sexualized clothes for children, padded bras for underage girls, overtly sexualized slogans on girls' clothing, for example, in Supre, which is a very popular store with tweens. We don't see the same extent of those products now. We also have been able to, and I'm not saying like we still have long-term ongoing campaigns, like against Honey Burdette, owned by Playboy, in our family shopping mall, pornified portrayals of women floor to ceiling. We've gone after the shopping centre CEOs over this, over normalising pornified depictions of women in our family shopping mall. So we many of these campaigns are still ongoing. But generally speaking, we don't see the same extent of sexualized clothing and products for children in mainstream stores like we used to. the other thing we've been able to do is harness social media. Yes, there's a lot of problems with social media, don't we know it? However, you know, in the old days, you'd write a letter, you'd go to the post office, you'd mail it. You'd be lucky if you ever got a response. Or by the time you got a response, the campaign you were complaining about was over, right? It's not like that now. We go out on social media, we name names. We got rid of 3 porn magazines in this country because we named the executives of Bauer Media Group. We got rid of Zoo Weekly, you may recall it. We got rid of Picture and People magazine. Picture and People were in Australia for 80 years. Corner stores, 7-Elevens, milk bars, out in the open, beside the lollies, next to the counter. We went after Bauer Media Group on Twitter. We put the faces of Bauer Media Group, we put their names, and we put examples from the magazines available in the corner store beside their names and their faces, right? That's how we do things. Within 6 weeks, those magazines had folded. They'd gone under. And the executive, the CEO, called me into his office and said, we're not going to publish these anymore. You're right. You're right, he said. He had a young daughter. He said, we've notified the German owners. We're not going to publish these magazines anymore. So that's, again, the power of action. You know, we do things a bit more radically, but why not? Like,
well, you're Australians.
Desperate times require desperate measures, and we'll use any lever available. We do the high-level government advocacy lobbying. We present before parliamentary inquiries. I'm appearing at a parliamentary inquiry this week and appearing before the UN this week on these issues. We do all of that high-level stuff, and then we do the camp. I can't even remember your original question, Simon. I'm sure it was
no, that's
fantastic. Right. There is a
sure.
shift. Yes, you still get opposition. Of course, you'll get opposition if you're doing something that threatens their profit margins.
Yep.
You know, but I'll say this: I don't think we get attacked in the way we used to because we have so much momentum. We have research on our side. We know the research on the links between objectifying women and violence against women, right? The global data says that objectified portrayals of women lead to a diminished view of women's competence, morality, and humanity. That's what the data tells us. We have parents on our side. They're seeing how harmed their children are by early exposure to explicit imagery, and how it's giving them distorted ideas about bodies, relationships, sexuality. You know, the best consent program in the world cannot compete with the porn industry, which is the world's largest department of education, right? You just cannot compete with that indoctrination through our children's, not just searching for porn on porn sites, it's dropped into their social media feeds. A lot of parents don't realize this. Most porn exposure happens first through social media.
Yep.
Okay. We also were involved here in Australia in raising age of access to social media to 16. There was a lot of opposition to that, but we got it through. Not that will make the platforms safe. The platforms are still dangerous. However, it will delay the age at which the harm starts happening. And
well, I think
children
that's
will have more cognitive development to be able to deal with it. But,
well, the maturity to begin working out
exactly.
what's reality and what's not. I mean, we're still struggling with this here in New Zealand. I'm sorry to say that some of this pornographic material is actually in some of the sex ed books and so forth, or what they call RSE here. It's quite shocking. But actually, parents are beginning to wake up, for want of a better phrase, to go, hold on a moment, why is my child acting out in certain ways, or as you know, through your own work and research, it's really, really young children. You're not talking teenagers, you're talking primary school, and parents are going, wait. But I'm also pleased you mentioned that consent issue. It's been one of my little soapboxes, including when I was in Parliament, that all this effort on consent, at one level has merit, but we're not looking at the drivers in behind, and actually particularly for girls and women, when the portrayals coming to them of how behaviours are, it's just it's maddening that's not been addressed, certainly here in New Zealand, as fully as it should be.
Well, we support consent education, but this is where it's limited. If it's not tackling porn, it's going to fail. Here's the other reason it's limited. Girls can still consent to things that harm them. So because consent has been put forward as like some kind of magic bullet that this will solve the problem, there's this false idea that if you consent, you're going to have a great sexual experience, right? Consent will give you a good experience, a nice experience. It's not true. Girls can still consent to things that hurt them and feel used, degraded, this is why I'm writing my new book, A No is a Complete Sentence, a boundary setting guide for girls. Because girls, they know about sex, they know about kink and bondage and choking and strangulation and OnlyFans and all the things they're supposed to do under the guise of empowerment, but they don't know how to say no. Because the common question I get from girls is, how do I say no? So I'm like, let's get back to basics here. You're allowed to say no, you're allowed to set boundaries. And let's dig a bit deeper. Well, what does consent really mean? What does it really look like? What are you actually consenting to? Are you being coerced? Are you under pressure? You know, the whole global porn industry, sexualized culture, OnlyFans culture, that whole ecosystem teaches girls that this is empowering and liberating. And of course, you'd say yes. And then they find they almost die from choking, from strangulation, which is actually a red flag for homicide, right? Red flag for homicide. So I'm trying to help girls to be truly empowered, to not say yes when they really don't want something, because that's what's happening. I didn't think I should say no. I didn't think I should hurt his feelings. I thought all girls did this, so I should do it too. I didn't want to be called a prude or hung up. And as a result, they're harmed, they're damaged. And I'm speaking to more young women now who, not for religious reasons at all, are choosing, and they will use this word, celibacy. They don't want what's on offer because it's disgusting. What boys want to do to them, how they're treated by men and boys is absolutely disgusting, and they want nothing to do with it. And can you blame them?
No, I mean, and that's my sort of thoughts too around the whole consent. There's always a place for it, of course, but it's consenting to what? And as you say, through porn, all these other avenues, they're being told, well, the boys are being told this is perfectly acceptable behaviour, and then we wonder why we have an issue with violence, sexual and physical, against women. And then, as you say, particularly for the young girls, they're being told that this is just what you're meant to be. Again, in the name of empowerment. This, I know I keep coming back to it, Melinda, but it's just the hypocritical paradox in all of this. You know,
it is. Yeah.
So jumping to the schools, you guys have done, you call it SHOT. It's an acronym for Sexual Harassment of Teachers. It came out last year. It's a survey that you've done, and some pretty, at one level, shocking results, but with what we've discussed so far, probably not completely surprising. But talk us through SHOT, how it started, and what are some of the insights?
Well, I've been speaking in schools for more than a decade. I've addressed thousands and thousands of students and teachers and parents. And the last few years, I was hearing more stories from girls about harmful sexual behaviours directed at them. I was hearing girls telling me that boys were threatening them with rape if they didn't send nudes. They were calling their mothers MILFs, MILFs, which I may not spell out on your show. Feel free to look it up. I had more girls telling me that boys were wanting to choke and strangle them. I had more girls telling me that boys were demanding nudes or sending dick pics, including to underage girls. Boys were sharing porn openly at school or airdropping porn on the school bus. More sexualized bullying, sexualized cruelty. And I started to collect these stories. Girls, a big theme was girls describing being sexually groaned at, moaned at, and grunted at school by the boys. These are sexual noises. They're simulating what they're hearing in pornography, simulating sexual acts at school. And the girls were repeating these stories to me. And I sat down for breakfast one day with Maggie Dent, who's a leading author and parenting expert here in Australia. And she proposed the idea, why don't we do a survey of teachers and just try to get a handle on how serious this issue is. Let's go beyond, the anecdotes. So Collective Shout, in partnership with Maggie, released a survey just through our own networks. It wasn't highly academic. It was just through our own personal contacts. And to get 1,000 responses was pretty mind-blowing. And teachers reported routinely being harassed, routinely being subjected to sexist comments, routinely being called sexual names boys had heard from porn. Again, I don't know how much you want me to say here, but teachers being told things like, why do you love COCK so much, miss? You've got a mouth that belongs on Pornhub was one that I was told personally. This kind of terminology. And
I think people need to hear this. I know it can be disturbing. I mean, you work in this space, but people do need to hear this, because this is exactly what's happening. And to drive it home, this is not just secondary, this is into primary. And if I read your report correctly, we're even talking into kindergarten at some stage, very young children.
Young as year 2 in kindergarten. The teachers reported sexual harassment directed to them as teachers, but they also, 79.9% of teachers said they were seeing more sexualized behaviors in schools. And they reported things like this: year 5 and 6 students sending nudes after being continually asked to do so, photos then being passed around to other boys. The teachers described children as young as year 2 simulating sex acts at school, young year 2s accessing and sharing pornographic content through personal devices or social media. The teachers reported receiving multiple disclosures from adolescent victims of harmful sexual behaviours, and all of these behaviours were carried out by male students. The female teachers also reported being propositioned, being threatened with rape, being subjected to sexist slurs, and the mimicking of sex acts in the classroom. So the female teachers and the female students are experiencing trauma, really, and psychosocial risks. Schools have become sites of abuse. That's the harsh reality. And we're seeing peer-to-peer sexual harassment at levels never seen before. I said to you before we started recording, Simon, that the Australian data shows that adolescent males are now not only the largest cohort of sex offenders in general, they're now the largest cohort of offenders against children. We have not seen this before in history. And the teachers identified a number of drivers they believed were fueling these harmful sexual behaviours. A big one was pornography. Second was social media. One teacher said that social media was the biggest issue in year 7. The other one was malign influences from the manosphere, such as Andrew Tate. Andrew Tate, with his pimping hose degree courses, his Hustler University, teaching dominance, control, emotional manipulation, how to get girls to work for you, how to get girls to sell themselves on OnlyFans to support your lifestyle. And tragically, Andrew Tate and mimics like him have captured a generation of boys. That's slowly lessening since he was charged with multiple crimes against women. However, this is its own story, but, you know, he's been allowed back into the US and released from Romania. And fortunately, the Attorney General of Florida is launching an investigation into Andrew Tate's alleged criminal behaviours. But he has captured a significant number of boys. Girls tell me that boys who follow Andrew Tate treat them worse, treat them badly. And this is, you know, our boys are just set up for failure in life. They don't know how to sustain a friendship, let alone, you know, a long-term relationship, you know, marriage and family life. It's being denied them because of the education that they get from the earliest of ages. So teachers at risk, female students at risk, and I strongly believe, I don't have any global data to prove it, but I believe this would be proven true, that this is a factor in the rise in school refusal and absenteeism in girls. Because they tell me they don't want to come to school. They're scared. They're afraid. I have little girls crying in front of me saying, I'm scared to come to school. I'm afraid of what might happen to me. They don't always understand what's behind the groaning and moaning noises, but they know there's something bad.
Something's not right.
Bad, and they don't like to be subjected to this. And this is in every school I go to. You know, there's this myth, it's just elite private schools. They're all, you know, certain kinds of boys from certain kind of... No, this is everywhere, including in faith-based schools where I've heard some of the worst stories.
That doesn't surprise me. Again, I'm no expert compared to you, but in some other areas, it's often actually the faith-based schools which have some of the worst behaviours. The academic outcomes are often put on a pedestal. But...
Yeah, totally. Two of the worst stories from a faith-based school. One was a girl told me that she was offered $100 note to make a porn film for a boy and his friends at school. $100 bill handed to her. And this was a seriously faith-based school. Like, I'm talking scripture verses all over the walls, crosses in the yard, Christian music playing over the loudspeakers. And also, and this was probably the most disheartening story from a faith-based school, was girls telling me that, yes, they were subjected to sexual moaning, groaning noises in the classroom, in the schoolyard, on the school bus, at the school camp, but also during the daily worship in the school's chapel. Right. And so porn has invaded every space, including the sacred spaces. And so we urge in our report, urgent intervention.
Well, let's turn to some of that, because, I mean, the problem, again, it shouldn't surprise any of our viewers and listeners, with porn in particular, so ubiquitous now, all in everywhere, so accessible, hence, the behaviours you're seeing. And I just wanted to stress, actually, as you mentioned, this is not just kids to kids or peers to peers. This is against the teachers, predominantly women, which I'm sure is leading to a rise in sexism. Once you begin to turn human beings, in this case girls and women, into objects or commodities, sexism is going to be on the rise.
It's also leading to more female teachers leaving the profession. I just want to throw that in as well. We are seeing large numbers of teachers in general leaving, but we're seeing a cohort of female teachers leaving, particularly younger female teachers that are new into teaching. I've spoken to them personally. They're leaving, they're getting out. They've only been out since graduation for like 6 months or less, and they say they can't handle it. It's too hard. They didn't come to school. They didn't want to come to school to be sexually harassed every day, as one young teacher said to me, with tears in her eyes. She'd been propositioned by her boy, who invited her into the storage locker at the school gym, the storage room, for sex. Another female teacher said that she checks the security cameras at her school every day before walking to the car park at the end of the day, because she will not walk the pathway from the school to the car park if there's boys on that pathway. She waits till they're all gone. So she's watching the cameras till they're all gone, and then she walks to the car. That's just a couple of examples.
That I'm almost lost for words in a way I shouldn't be, because again, I keep coming back to that word ubiquity, that it has just become so prominent, in many ways supported, celebrated, that these are going to be the natural horrific consequences. Sadly, in New Zealand, we don't have a lot of this data yet. We were actually just looking at some of the, if you will, expulsions or stand-down data for sexual harassment. It's very mixed here in New Zealand, which is probably related to the schools here are very reluctant to actually stand a student down for any behaviour. But I could say anecdotally, a number of teachers leave the profession here because of behavioural problems. Because if the school doesn't act, the girls and the teachers see nothing's being done, and boys become emboldened to continue the behaviour. Now, there's a fine line here, because generally speaking, we want to keep boys in school. We want to keep students in school, right? However, what happens when they become a menace to other children, when they're hurting other children, they're traumatizing other children? I'm supporting a mother here in Australia as we speak, whose 12-year-old daughter was subjected, and I've seen the screen captures, to direct rape threats from a 12-year-old boy, among others. These 12-year-old boys and 13-year-old boys were in encrypted chat on Discord. They were sharing child sexual exploitation material in this encrypted chat. They're 12 and 13. And one of them threatened this girl with rape. She won't go to school now. She won't go back to school. And not much was done. However, it's just had attention in a big newspaper, and it's going on the ABC today. So, that can sometimes help get the school leaders' attention. But my point is, how many strikes, how many chances do you get when so many other children are being traumatized? They're denied education because they won't go to school anymore. They're left psychologically damaged. And if schools don't act, you see in Australia, and I'm sure it would be the case there, schools have a legal duty of care to provide a safe educational environment, right? That's a legal duty.
So if you're not doing it, you're in breach of the law here.
Oh,
So
the
we have to
irony,
ask
the irony
why.
here, and it's probably as much a political point, that because you're right, safety is very important in schools. It's in the legislation, but it's more safety around ideas and emotions. So someone says the wrong thing, excuse the French, all hell breaks loose. But if it's physical, behavioural, sexual abuse, it's often just, we just have to work with the child. There isn't the same consequences. So we've got things sort of the wrong way round here.
Yes.
In New
You
Zealand.
also need to look at it from this perspective of it doesn't serve the boys to cover up the behaviour because it's setting them up for failure. So if you don't address it early, and this is what the teachers in our report said, behaviour was ignored so long. At the earlier stages, it escalated and became far more severe. They wanted to see it crack down much earlier. And that's why our recommendations include things like having a code of conduct that students have to sign at the start of the school year. Put it in the school diary, the school journal, whatever the students are given. These are our expectations. These are our standards. And if you would like to be educated at our school, this is what we expect of you. And the boys need to hear that. They need clarity around acceptable and unacceptable behaviours, and they need to hear it from the top. You know,
boys need boundaries, as you know. They need boundaries, and part of it too, and they need to see the consequences. When, little Robert or Jack is allowed to behave in a certain way and nothing happens, the other boys go, oh, okay, that seems to be acceptable.
Permission to all the other boys to behave the same way. The other big gap I've identified over the last few years, and it's in our report as well, is that schools have sexual harassment policies, but they only apply teacher to teacher or teacher to student. They don't apply student to student or student to teacher, right? So we need a uniformly agreed sexual harassment policy with clear policies, procedures, so that teachers are clear, because teachers are flying blind because they don't have policies on sexual harassment that relate student to student, student to teacher. Another significant problem is that there are barriers to reporting. Girls are scared to report. Teachers are scared to report. They said this in our study because they say the pushback they get, the punishment they get afterwards is not worth the cost of reporting. The backlash, the gossip, the rumours, the undermining, worse things they feel will happen to them if they report. And in Australia, we have this big anti-dobbing culture. It's dobbing. You don't dob. You don't dob. I've tried to recast this. This is an act of justice. If you report, then that will empower other girls to report, and your little sisters won't experience this. Like, think about your sisters, little sisters, younger girls coming up through the school. Think about your future daughters. So this is actually a just act to disclose, to report. But if girls don't feel safe to do it, they won't do it. And most girls don't report. I'm often the first one they disclose to because they feel safe to do that. But this is a tragedy for our schools, that the girls especially do not feel safe to report. So we've got to take away those barriers, those obstacles. And then in certain cultural groups, it's even worse. You don't talk about bad male behaviour.
Yep.
You don't out, you don't out the men in your family, your brothers. So you've got to deal with that as well.
Same issues here. And it's part of that abusive culture, isn't it? That you don't speak, you're to be silenced. We've got that same, Yes. So obviously you've got a couple of recommendations there.
We can't address it. We have to be able to name this, This is not having a go at boys at all. This is saying, look, we want something better for the boys as well. Right? They've been harmed. They've been indoctrinated. They've been subjected to this propaganda from the global porn industry, from the Andrew Tates of this world. We need to help them to be respectful, good young men so they can have a better life. The girls can have a better life, the boys can have a better life, and we can have a better society. But the way we're tracking does not augur well for civilization.
No, well, as I say, we have a generation, if not generations, coming through that really have no understanding about actually relationships in the best sense of that word, of actually engaging with one another as male and female. It's become an objective, commercialized, and ultimately abusive, which is why I just think the work you're leading is just so vitally important. And I'm conscious of your time, so I'll wrap things up and let you keep going, because as you say, big news today that you've got all of Andrew Tate's rubbish, I'm trying to be diplomatic, taken down. But Look, thanks for what you do, because this is a dark, toxic space, and just being in it, I'm sure, comes with a toll. But we need brave people like yourself, Melinda, who lead from the front. So thank you. It's just, again, grateful that you're leading
this. Thanks for saying, Simon. And we do have some Collective Shout supporters in New Zealand. We'd love to be able to grow the movement there, and we can help equip your people to run campaigns. We are seen as global experts on running campaigns now. We run workshops on how to do it. We break it down. This is how you can do it. This is how you can see change in your community. We've delivered workshops on how to do this at a global level at some of the biggest conferences in the world. So we'd be happy to assist any of your people if they want to get in touch. collectiveshout.org. You can sign up there. It's free. And you can be on our mailing list. We can put you in touch with other New Zealanders that might want to get involved there and change things that need to be changed there, and collaborate with other like-minded people and organisations.
And to take encouragement, as you've shown over the years that you've been operating there in Australia, you've had many wins at some tough times, undoubtedly, but actually many, many wins, because collectively you're working together. So just to remind people, that's collectiveshout.org. So it might be based out of Australia, but New Zealanders and anyone else listening around the world, as you do, to log on in and be part of it. Melinda, thank you so much for your time. Congratulations on the success that you are having, and thank you for the work that you and Maggie and the team have done around exposing what's happening to our teachers and to students at school. So thanks for being part of the show.
Simon, we appreciate your interest. Thanks so much. Let's keep talking.